Go back to that earlier story. The City of Cape Town's plans to add a 7-megawatt solar plant onto the grid to avert power cuts. The solar plant will be based in Atlantis, north of the city. Let's speak about this then. We're joined by Kadri Nassiep, the Executive Director for Energy with the City of Cape Town. Welcome back to the program. So we're just talking earlier about the extent to which this project would be helpful in easing the pressure from load shedding.
Well, thank you, and apologies for the disconnection. I assume it has to do with load shedding since one of the cell towers must have lost signal at that point in time. But just very briefly, just to recap what I just said to you, and I'm not sure where I dropped off, but the small scale of the project is really intended to provide us with enough learning experiences to allow us to plan for the next generation of solar plants that will be constructed and owned and operated by the city. That'll be up to 100 megawatts, which is far more significant, bearing in mind that this is part of our plans to achieve energy security of supply. And aligned to that will then be the purchase of power coming through from the independent sources, which will make up a far greater percentage of the electricity supply in Cape Town.
You say yourself that this is not a large project. So put in context for someone who's listening from Cape Town, just how much it would be able to do as far as electrification.
Yeah, sure. It's a very small fraction, so it's in the order of about 0.15% of what our consumption is at present. But as I said to you, it's more of a project to demonstrate and learn from so that we are in a position to move forward. At the same time, appreciate the fact that we want to create job opportunities in the area where the project will be constructed, and also look at the tariffing that will be required. So in other words, some of our customers will also require green certificates and green tariffs in order to market their products abroad. And this creates that opportunity for them. If you look at how many households could be provided power by such a plant, 7 megawatts will probably provide you with power up to probably about 3,000 households. That's an average type of figure. Bearing in mind different households, whether you're in Constantia or Khayelitsha, would have different levels of consumption. So you'd have to try and find an average number. But for 7 megawatts, about 3,000 would be a reasonable average.
And Cape Town wants to build this in Atlantis. Is that a deliberate choice of location or the only available space, I wonder?
Well, Atlantis has also been marketed now as an industrial investment destination as part of the special economic zone that's been created there. So certainly it would be part of the city's plans to help build the economy, the local economy in the region. There are other sites that are suitable, but of course you need large tracts of land in order to construct these ground-mounted solar plants. So for every 1 megawatt of solar that you want to install that's ground-mounted, you need in the order of about 2 hectares of available land in order to do that. And there isn't that much free land available within the city's boundaries in order to do that. We do have other potential sites as well, and they are located elsewhere in the city, but those are still subject to a feasibility study at this stage.
And yes, this is a small-scale intervention, so to speak, but the other immediate challenge with it is that because you intend to build only next year, 2023, this would only begin to, let's say, electrify those 3,000 households in 2024.
No, not exactly. So the nice thing about solar plants, I mean, first of all, there's a very short lead time. You're talking about several months to construct versus a coal-fired station which could take up to 10 years, depending on the technology that's introduced. So once the project is concluded next year, it'll be commissioned immediately, which means it's synchronized with the grid and is connected back into our network immediately. That, in other words, providing that power back into our network immediately. So that will all happen during the course of next year, which I think bodes well for the renewable energy industry in the city. As I said, we're looking at purchasing power from IPPs, and that power will be available to the grid probably in about 2025. And the reason for that delay is that the procurement process has to be concluded first, and thereafter the successful developers will have to reach financial closure, make sure that all their permitting and make sure that the grid connection has been taken care of, and thereafter do construction and then the commissioning of those projects, which will take you more or less up until 2025. Already we're also looking at procuring power from our commercial customers in the city. Mayor has already announced plans to allow our commercial customers to become net generators for the first time, so they can sell surplus energy derived from solar panels on their rooftop back into the grid and be paid a very competitive rate for that power, and that can be done immediately.
If you're saying that this could be helpful as soon as next year, is the plan then to finish construction, shall we say, halfway through 2023? What's the target?
So the engineering, procurement and construction tender has just been advertised, so that will take a month or so before it closes. And thereafter there is an adjudication process after evaluation of the bidders. There could well be an objection, which means a possible delay, but assume that there's no objection and appeals, then we could see construction beginning, let's say, by the first quarter of the next calendar year, and the construction will probably take us in the order of a month or two, and that will take us very close to the middle of the year, and commissioning will happen straight thereafter. So you could look very much towards the end of June, July, as being the most probable area for commissioning of the plant.
Right, and you mentioned IPPs, of course, and there is still quite a bit of process or paperwork, shall we say, that needs to be done before that sort of agreement is signed between the city and some of the larger companies. And as the President and Cabinet are going back and forth about the fastest way to get us out of these power cuts, the crisis as a whole, do you think there's room at all, without dragging you into politics, of course, to eliminate some of the red tape even further to ensure that metros such as Cape Town are able to sign these deals quicker and get power added to the grid much faster?
Well, absolutely, and we can depoliticize that for the purposes of this interview and just talk about what some of the bureaucracy is. So there is in the Electricity Regulation Act a provision that's been made for what's called a Section 34 determination. And so this is in effect a ministerial allowance that is made for power that has to be added to the grid. Now, given the amendments that have been made to the regulations in light of the President's call for lifting of thresholds, so there are currently no limits in terms of licensing, in terms of the maximum before you need a license. So now you can have practically no licensing requirement for a project of any size. Of course, you still have to register the project with the regulator. So aligned to that dispensation should surely come a removal of the call for that Section 34 determination, which does take time, is not very clear as to its intent, and will hold up the process. Aligned to that is also the need for us to be able to enter into longer term contracts. So these are beyond the 3 years, which is the norm under the Municipal Finance Management Act. Anything longer will require concurrence and recommendations from National Treasury. So we'd anticipate that that process would be expedited. And then, of course, just to make sure that our power purchase agreements are in line with national government's requirements. And from there, we should find it a far more smoother exercise to get those projects off the ground.
Kadri, really good to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time, sir.